Just because it's January and there's snowflakes coming down around you doesn't mean you shouldn't be planting for your garden. In fact, some vegetables require that you start planting your seeds now. And in this episode, we're going to be planting onions because they need a long time to get started and grow. And I'm going to show you how step by step what to do. Every week, we'll check up on their progress and right up through harvest. And then at the end, I'll put together a whole step-by-step guide to growing onions so you can see from seed planting to harvest what you need to do all in one brief video. And since onion seeds don't store very long, I'll show you how to save seeds in a follow-up video that we'll then be able to use year after year to plant our onions. So let's get started. I'm growing two types of onions this year. One, the Utah Yellow Sweet Spanish, and the other, Elsa Craig, a nice big onion, but both perfect for this Zone 7A in northeastern New Jersey climate I live in. Now, the first thing I do is preparing my seed starting mix. Now, you can buy your own seed starting mix at the store. Get seed starting mix, not potting soil. But I prefer to make my own because ultimately it's a lot cheaper to make your own. So I get a bale of peat moss, and then I use this strainer that I got from the dollar store, and I sift it through there. I don't want all these big chunks and things like that in the mix, so I sift it all so that it's nice and soft and loose and light for the seeds. Next, I use perlite. Now, if you can get a fine grade of perlite, that'd be best, but mine's kind of big, chunky pieces, so I like to sift that as well, and I do it about a 1-to-1 ratio, maybe a little bit less, of the perlite to peat moss by volume, and the extra big chunks, I just put them back in the bag because that way I can use them in other applications. But now I just mix it in, and what the perlite does is provide a good drainage mix. The last ingredient I use in my mix is vermiculite. Where the perlite provides drainage, vermiculite actually adds water retention capabilities. Both are an exploded volcanic rock, but vermiculite lets you retain water in your mix. So I just eyeball how much I want. And again, not necessary with the vermiculite, because I think it all actually fits through the strainer, but I had dumped some on the ground and picked it up, so there were some large chunks in there, which is why I sifted it. And now I just mix it all together into the container, and now this is the mix that I use for planting seeds. It's a nice, loose, friable soil, well, not really soil, but medium to grow seeds in. The last thing I do is I add water to it. Peat moss is hydrophobic, so the water needs to absorb into the mix. And so just get your hands dirty and mix it around, and it'll quickly start to absorb the water. And just takes a little practice to get to know the right amount of water to add to a mix. You don't want it wringing wet. But you want it certainly moist enough where when you water it in the future, the water will actually absorb into the mix. So I'm just mixing around with my hands just to make sure all the peat moss is absorbing water, and then I'll be ready to add to the containers. I use these 3x3 or so containers. Picked them up at Home Depot a couple of years ago. They came in a tray. There was like 18 of them per pack. I think they were $5 for the set. But I find them good. It gives the seeds a lot of room to grow as opposed to those tiny little individual cell packs. So I fill them up, press the medium down, the seed starting mix down, and particularly with onions, because I multi-sow them, and you can plant onions pretty close together. They don't need to be spaced far apart because the roots, they'll tease apart pretty easily. So I just take the seeds, and I don't want to cover the entire surface with seeds, but I sprinkle them across the top, and I'm not quite sure really how many's in there, but I'm going to use two containers now, and just again fill it up, and then I'll compress the soil down because you don't want you want the seeds to have good contact with the mix. Air in the mix will cause problems for the seeds growing, so you want to make sure the thing is firm, not tight. Just as you can see, I'm just pressing it down lightly, and then again, just sprinkle the seeds on top. Now, the last thing I do is just cover the seeds with a light covering of the peat moss. It doesn't have to be too deep. You actually don't want onion seeds planted too deep, just enough to cover them. And then I'm going to pour some water on top. And as you can see, the peat moss is repelling the water. And of course, I didn't have any more of the other mix left over. And the last thing to do is just put a sticker in so you know what it is you planted in your containers. So now I'll stick them on my grow rack underneath the grow lights. They won't actually need the lights until they actually sprout. You can see I have some heat mats there. Onions really don't need the bottom heat. I might give them a couple extra days head start, but we'll check back in a week to see whether they've sprouted. But now we'll watch their progression over the coming weeks from now until harvest. This is my garlic bed. It's week 9 since they were planted back in mid-November. And as you can see, they got a little singe from that bitter cold that blew in all across the country at the start of the month. But they're fine. I want them to be dormant for the rest of the winter to come. Still got January and February to go. And they'll bounce back in the spring, no problem. So this is how they're doing so far. And they're looking good. And I'm expecting a good garlic crop this year. So make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can watch the progress on all our vegetables as we try to grow a supermarket in our own backyard. Okay, thanks for watching.